Okay, I'm coming to you on March 7th, and it's what seems to be my nightly talk on the Ukrainian war. And, well, today the battlefield seems to be, again, static, but going fairly well for the Ukrainians. It's going very badly for the Russians. In fact, their losses seem to be mounting. They really haven't gotten their act together. The 40-mile convoy going nowhere, that's going to be killed. That's going to be destroyed by the Ukrainians at some point. Uh, and even in Kharkiv, I've read where the Ukrainians have counterattacked and driven the Russians back to the border. In Mariupol, they're still fighting. Kherson, I saw a report where Ukrainians were shooting down Russian helicopters. So at the battlefield, while static, hasn't made major movements one way or the other. It bodes badly for the Russians, who have to basically achieve their military objectives before something so awful takes place. That is, that Putin's military just slaughters civilians, as they seem to have tried today by mining humanitarian corridors, until something so bad happens that the American public and Western Europeans look at that as completely unacceptable, and they do mount some kind of creative no-fly zone against the Russians. It's a very, active involvement in a military conflict. In this case, seems to be a very tenuous line, because we are providing weaponry, we are providing aircraft, we are providing intelligence to the Ukrainians. So in some ways, we're already actively involved in the conflict. Nonetheless, I think Putin would be suicidal to try to attack NATO forces. So I don't think he will. I think he will back down. Again, as I said yesterday, I think any kind of tactical nuclear device that Putin unleashes on the battlefield would be countered by a major nuclear attack by NATO and the United States. So I think that's off the table. Besides, if he actually tried it, I think he would be deposed immediately by sensible, or at least sane, Russian actors. Although I've seen two reports today where Putin seems to be isolated. Two reports that mention that Putin is isolated, that the Russian people are turning against him. The first report comes from a former Russian journalist, a woman by the name of Farida Rustamova, who writes about how isolated Putin is, that he only speaks to very close advisors, and those being the Secretary of Defense, or the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, and the Chief of Staff, Valery Gerasimov, and the FSB security chief, Alexander Boritno, and his first deputy, Sergei Korolov. And that these are the only people that have access to Putin, who seems to be isolated and growing increasingly paranoid. He's also very, very upset about the performance of his military. He's furious because they have performed so badly. But that was to be expected. I thought that the Russians were going to drop the ball, and they have. But he's isolated. He is not getting any kind of advice from a wider circle that might be very upset with his decision. In fact, that is part of the report, that his even among the higher echelons of Russian government, there are people who believe that this was a catastrophic mistake, and that Putin has just overreached. My sense is that this is the beginning of the end for Putin. He's not going to come back from this. So that is going. I think that is in the cards, and I say that because Putin's power rests on a charismatic appeal. Max Weber, the German sociologist, said that there were three types of political power. The first one being charismatic, that is, a leader emerges to solve a people's problem, and he is given the trust and the support of the people, and that he is able to consolidate if he deals successfully with the problem. That is, he wins the war, he restores the economy, he addresses issues that speak to a nationalist identity. And Putin's power essentially rests on that basis. That is a charismatic power. His power is not traditional, and he has no claim to traditional power. That is a monarchy or a kind of aristocratic feudal character to his power. And there's very legal. Weber said that the other type of power was legalistic or bureaucratic. And yes, there are elements of that, but I think that they're not sufficiently consolidated to support Putin in times of dire crisis. And that is, he's in crisis now. And if he loses this war, that charismatic power collapses. And I think that he's heading for that. In fact, there might be growing resentment among millions of Russians to this war. That is part of another report I saw by a anchor in a shutdown Russian TV station, TV Rain, a woman by the name of Ekaterina Kotrikadze. And she spoke to Farid Zakaria and said that there were millions of Russians that feel that this war is unwarranted, unjust, and criminal, and therefore have turned against Putin. If those two reports seem to indicate that there's growing pressure on Putin, and the war goes on, and he cannot defeat the Ukrainians, I think his power is significantly reduced, and he will be eventually removed. As a political leader. That, I think, is going to happen because I don't see how the Russians, with the correlation of forces, will be able to defeat the Ukrainians. Even taking cities, they won't be able to hold them. And the death toll, the casualties will be so great that it will demand Putin I think, settle it on terms that will not be seen as a victory. In addition to that, there seems to be growing opposition to Putin outside of Europe. Singapore just announced a series of sanctions, and they seem to be at least tacitly agreed to by the Chinese. There was that bank, the Chinese-controlled bank, that refused to finance Russian oil sales. In addition, today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry and its foreign minister, Wang Yi, announced that China would send humanitarian aid to the Ukraine. That does not bode well for Putin. And there may be back-channel attempts to end the war, which has hurt China's project, the Belt and Road projects that they champion in Eastern Europe. In fact, Putin's bombs have destroyed a lot of the infrastructure for the Chinese projects. And this is not going to sit well with the Chinese. So I think that that is also an indicator of the diminishing support for Putin in the world. As I see it, the skies are getting very dark for Vladimir Putin. And he may be able to hold on for some time, but I think at the end of this, Putin's days will be numbered.